Okay, hi everyone. It's really good to be here. I must say the turnout is mind-blowing. I'm really, really happy that you guys want to learn about how to democratize data analytics. So in this session we'll be talking about democratizing data analytics with large language models and um, retrieval augmented generation. Apologies. Today it's been a very, very long day for me, and but it's also a little bit nervous, I think, because I can't imagine that a lot of you want to learn about this. So, okay, organizations are increasingly using the power of Gen AI to build really, really impressive applications. So things like virtual assistants and chatbots. We know the power of Gen AI because it's really conversational, it's generative, it does the work, it's really good. But what happens when you want to build for your internal teams? What happens when you want to ground Gen AI with internal data? I think what happens is that a lot, especially customers and enterprise, they struggle with this because when building Gen AI, in building a Gen AI and exposing it to internal data, you may be at risk of exposing it to sensitive data, and you want to ensure that you don't do that. So that's what RAG is there to do. And I'm going to explain to you guys how to build your RAG tools with security enforced. OK, so over the past few decades, organizations have poured time, money, and talent into making sense of their data, starting from the 90s or the 80s, when data warehousing was coined by IBM researchers. And then we went on to data lakes, things like data lakes and self-service BI tools, and more recently, concepts like data mesh and data fabric. But even with that evolution, one thing has remained the same, and that is get the right data to the right people so they can make the right decisions in the right time. So that sounds really simple, but it is really, really difficult to do because there's a lot of components when building this. There's the tooling, there's the educating people in the organization about how to use data properly. There's just a lot of things that is involved in building this. So, and also for me as a solutions architect, I work with financial services customers, and I'm privy to all the issues that comes with accessing data at the right time, because you have to raise a ticket, to the customer success people or to the support people, and then you have to prioritize it based on their own priorities. By the time they solve that issue, you've already moved on, and you no longer need the data. So we want to be able to build a solution that allows you to get data access at the right time, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. Before I do that, my name is Victory China. I'm a solutions architect. I've been looking after customers in financial services for the past 5 years. I'm a data analytics specialist as well, looking after customers, helping them migrate their applications, doing things like data strategy, doing things like building out their data warehouse. So I understand the issues that they face, and that's what I'll be sharing today. So before we go ahead, let's start with what we know. Let's start with the foundations. Data democracy, what does it mean? And it simply means making data accessible and understandable to everyone in the organization, irregardless of their technical skills or their job function. So in practice, what this means is that you're creating an environment that raises curiosity, that encourages curiosity. You are raising data literacy organization-wide. And this is not just training, getting them to do some training or filling out a form. It means creating real tenets within your team that everyone refers to and everyone knows that it's part of the organization. We do it in my team where before you can talk to your manager about certain things, or if you are doing your one-to-ones and you're discussing with your manager, there are tenets in which you have to use to imbibe or to use to put your point across. So it should be part and parcel of how your organization works. Data users should be given governed access to the right data, and they should be empowered to think like investigators. They should be empowered to think about the right question, to ask the right question, to look for the right data that supports or doesn't support their hypothesis. Okay, so let's look at the ways that organizations are pairing the fluency of large language models and the reliability of retrieval-augmented generation to boost productivity. Before we do that, I want to talk to you about some custom stories. According to Gartner, by 2026, more than 80% of enterprises will be using generative AI APIs or deploying Gen AI-enabled apps. And so we're already seeing highly regulated enterprises like JP Chase and Goldman Sachs. And you're seeing how they're embracing Gen AI to boost productivity for their internal staff, for creating complex documents to summarization to data analytics. Now, where RAG comes into play is when people are using Gen AI tools to perform tasks that require internal data grounding. So for example, where you want to do some data analytics, you want to see some insight or some trend, and you want to understand, or maybe you want to understand how something or some sort of knowledge, external knowledge, applies to your internal ways of working. Okay, so with that, what is RAG? What does RAG actually mean? So there's three pillars here. There is the retrieval engine. And actually, before we go into that, RAG as a meaning is the process of augmenting a user's prompts with relevant information. The retriever works as it goes into the knowledge base. It retrieves the right data or the right the right data or the right insight. And then that retriever will then send it up to the prompt with the context. So it augments the prompt with context from the knowledge base, and then it generates the answer. So while we do that, we're pairing the understanding and the generative power of Gen AI with the reliability that comes with RAG. And this means that your large language models are not prone to hallucinations, because we know that's what it does. But when you provide it and when you guide it with the right prompts and the right internal data, it reduces that risk significantly. Okay, I'm going to have a little water break. Okay, so now that we know what RAG is, how does it run in practice? Unfortunately, my animation does not work, so you can see every single thing. But I want us to start with the data ingestion workflow, the data ingestion layer. So as you can see, you can start in with your company data. So this could be unstructured data sitting in your S3. It could be your PDFs. It could be static websites, or even your API call to your CRM tools. So once you have your company data, you can then connect this data. Once you connect the RAG to your data, it is broken down into small chunks. And these small chunks are cut down in a way that it retains its meaning, its semantic meaning. Each chunk carries metadata that links back to the source of where it is. So that way, when your chunk is retrieved, you can show the exact page that it comes from, which again speaks to explainability. And then you pass it on to the embedding model, which translates each of these texts into a numerical representation. So that numerical representation is also retaining that meaning. So an example here might be things like refund and return. So they are of the same meaning, and that chunk is given a particular numerical number that retains that. This means that when you are searching or when you are querying data or querying the knowledge base with natural language, you are ensured that the output will retain or will have the meaning of what you're asking for. So I really wish I could show you a demo. Unfortunately, we don't have time, but I will share all the resources at the end, and if you follow me on LinkedIn, you can access them. OK, so we understand how the chunk happens and the embedding model. Right. So what happens after you have that embedding numerical number, then you have the database, the vector database. It's a large, multi-dimensional database that stores all of those indexes. So again, with that relationship that we spoke about. So what this means is as we go over to the text generation workflow, and you ask a question, and say, for example, let's use, oh, apologies. What did I do? So let's do something like, if I was to ask a question like, provide the CSAT scores for Big Data London for the past 3 years, and present it to me in a graph. What happens is it is also doing the same embedding, breaking it into chunks, giving it a representation, and then it's going and doing a similarity search, a semantic search for the CSAT. And it goes, oh, OK, I know that we've had marketing data for the past 3 years. Where does that sit? Is that on an S3 bucket? And then it brings that up to the augmenter, and then it says, these are the CSAT scores, passes it onto a large language model, and then it augments that and generates it into a graph. So the large language model does what it's good at, the picture, design, and all that stuff, but it grounds your data. So I hope that was that gave you a good understanding of how RAG works. OK, so you saw how that is. You can see how complicated it is. Let's think about what considerations you should be thinking about when you're building for your internal users, knowing that they will be exposed to your internal data. How do you build RAG properly in a way that doesn't expose sensitive data? Let's start with selecting embedding models. You need to be thinking about, there are loads of embedding models out there. There's open source ones, and there are ways to benchmark them. But you need to be thinking about, which one should I pick? You need to be thinking about, you need to be considering, what is it tuned for? So is it tuned for understanding context across different languages? How does it handle certain use cases where you need to retain context in, maybe you have like policy, for example, policy documents that are multi-page. So how does it retain that same context as it goes through all of that? You need to be thinking about how that would work and what are the use cases that you're trying to build for. Another thing you should be thinking about is your vector store. So pick a vector database that works for your team. So if your team are already using, if your team of engineers are using Postgres, for example, they can probably start with investigating PG vectors. Or if your team is like familiar with graph database and you are comfortable with that, you consider things like Amazon Neptune Analytics. Also think about the day-to-day management. If you have a small engineering team, there's no point trying to manage, patch, and worry about databases if you can go serverless. So you can think about Amazon OpenSearch serverless for that. And then orchestration. You can imagine managing, as new data comes into your knowledge base, syncing that, orchestrating that is a lot of engineering work, making sure that it's chunked properly, indexed properly, that your retriever is working properly. There's also the DevOps part of it as well that you need to be thinking about. It's a lot, actually, to be able to manage. And this is where a tool like Amazon Knowledge Base comes in. So it's a fully managed support for end-to-end RAG. And it manages automated ingestion of your workflows from the data store to managing your RAG refreshes and incremental data automation. And you can do all this as well and you can also automatically connect your RAG tool to foundation models of your choice in a secure way, because it's sitting there. You're exposed to all of the open source foundation models, or you can bring your own one in the same platform, connect that, and you don't have to worry about the day-to-day of that. Titan, for example, Titan text embedding from AWS's embedding model is optimized for doing RAG across 112 languages. So it kind of meets what I was talking about in the last slide. It also supports easy retrieval and attribution. Attribution. It also supports easy retrieval and citations as well. So when you want to do a citation, when you want to cite where the sources come from, it automatically does that for you and manages that at scale. Okay. So I think we've got a good understanding of how that works. Similarly, you can extend your RAG-powered applications with from just being able to answer your questions to performing actions with Amazon agents or agents in general. I don't want to talk about agents here because I feel like all of us know what agents are, but we could talk about it if you want. But it's just we don't have time, and I want to make sure that I can get through this on time. But yeah, like I said, you can go from building something that works, that accesses your data, to make the right data analytics, or to do some data analytics and to help your internal teams. But you can also build complex workflows, such as, send this email or things like update this calendar, or whatever workflows you want to do. You can have different agents doing different things for you, and you can do that at scale with Amazon Bedrock agents. And then the other tool on the side is Amazon Bedrock Core, Agent Core. This is for me ensuring that you are able to go at scale on full production. This was supposed to be the demo, but I'm going to talk through the architecture. This is basically a financial analyst portfolio system, and it's using multi-agent collaboration to divide up the tasks, and each of these agents are prompted to do their own thing until the goal is met. So, for example, this one, the one on the bottom, is the data assistant, and its job is to go and find all the data, find all this from the stock knowledge base, and accumulates that and sends it over to the portfolio assistant, which creates a portfolio. Yeah, I will share this all on my LinkedIn for those who do follow. Okay, so we've talked through what data democratization looks like. We've talked about how RAG works. We talked about the considerations. I think another thing I wanted to talk about as well, let me go back quickly, is about how to ensure that on your knowledge bases you're able to implement security. So you can use things like metadata filters. This ensures that it takes on and it looks at what you're authorized to use. So if you're a business analyst, for example, there are only certain types of data that you can have access to. And it takes on that policy, it takes on the permissions before it allows you to query that. So that way, you're only providing the right granular type of access to the people that need it. Another thing that you could do as well is using S3 Access Grant, which work by, it connects you to your corporate ID. So if you have a corporate ID, you already know what you can have access to. It takes that on, and then it would then augment what you can access or not. So again, going back to the key takeaways. So what should you be doing when you're thinking about, okay, 10 minutes. Okay, so what should you be doing if you are thinking about building a RAG tool for your internal users in a secure and governed way? You should apply product thinking here. I mentioned data mesh. A lot of us know about the core principles of data mesh, and one of them is data as a product. So think about your consumers. And your consumers here are no longer, customers, end customers. You are thinking about customers who are inside, that need your corporate data, and that require it to do productive work. So how do you ensure that you apply the right governance? How do you ensure that it's governed? How do you ensure that it's truthful? That's what you should be thinking about when building this. Like I said as well, identify the personas. Who are the people that need this tool? What would make it productive for them? Why you need to think about how to make this useful and not just build a tool for the sake of it. So what kinds of data would they want to access? What kinds of tasks do they need to do in their day-to-day? So build that with that in mind. And then start small. we've seen this. I've seen this in financial services. I come and I hear things like, I want to build this thing for the whole of EMEA. I want to build this tool that allows all of our users to be able to access this from that, and it's like, no, we need to think about what is a business case, and we need to break down who needs it first, and then build a POC, test that it works, test that it's human-centered, it's built with human-centered design, test that it's governed well, and then you can scale from there. So with that, I'm going to thank you. My resources, I'll put some more resources, like I said, on LinkedIn. I'm going to say thank you so much for coming to my session. I hope you found it useful. And if there's any questions, please feel free to ask.